Board of Trustees of the McAllen Independent School District will be held Monday, March 4th, 2024, beginning at 5 p.m. in the Dr. Ricardo Chapa Boardroom of the Administration Building of the McAllen Independent School District, located at 2000 North 23rd Street, McAllen, Texas. At this meeting, there may be discussion and action by the board on the items and subjects listed as follows. Items listed on this agenda may be taken in an order other than as shown on this agenda. Item 1, call the meeting to order. I have done so at 5 p.m. Item 2, public comments.
The school board encourages public comments at all board meetings. According to Board Policy BED Local, board meetings and public participation and related district administrative procedures and practices. Persons wanting to make a statement to the board are required to register with the superintendent's secretary 1 hour prior to the start of the scheduled meeting. Audience participation at a board meeting is limited to the early stages of the meeting. At all other times during a board meeting, the audience shall not enter into discussion or debate on matters being considered by the board unless requested. Each participant is limited to 2 minutes per meeting to make comments to the board. At regular board meetings, the board shall permit public comments regardless of whether the topic is an item on the agenda posted with notice of the meeting. At all other board meetings, public comments shall be limited to only items on the agenda posted with notice of the meeting. The board shall not deliberate or decide regarding any subject that is not included on the agenda posted with notice of the meeting. If an issue mentioned is on tonight's agenda, the board will defer discussion of the issue until the appropriate time during the meeting. Should the speaker drift from the stated subject or becomes disruptive or abusive, he or she shall be given 1 warning. If a second warning is required, then the speaker may forfeit the remaining time allotment. The board shall not tolerate disruption of the meeting by members of the audience. The board has adopted complaint policies that are designed to secure at the lowest administrative level a prompt and equitable resolution of complaints and concerns. Please refer to the following policies. Student and or parent complaints should refer to policy FNG. Employees refer to policy DGBA, and citizens can refer to policy GF. Copies of district policies are available on the McAllen ISD website at mcallenisd.org.
La mesa directiva de McAllen ISD invita al público a dar sus comentarios en todas las reuniones de sus juntas. Según la póliza de la mesa directiva BED local, menciona si la mesa directiva tiene una reunión, participaciones públicas, procedimientos y prácticas administrativas. Las personas que desean hacer una declaración ante la Junta debe registrarse con la secretaria del superintendente 1 hora antes del inicio de la reunión programada. Participación de la audiencia en una reunión de la Junta Directiva es limitada en la fase inicial. En cualquier otro momento durante una reunión de la Junta Directiva, el público no entrará en discusión o debate sobre asuntos siendo considerados por la Junta, a menos que se solicite. Cada participante está limitado a 2 minutos por reunión para hacer comentarios a la Junta de la Mesa Directiva. En las reuniones periódicas se permitirá comentarios públicos independientemente de si el tema es un elemento publicado en la agenda. En todas las demás reuniones de la Junta de la Mesa Directiva, los comentarios públicos serán limitados a solo los puntos de la agenda para esta Junta. La Mesa Directiva no deliberará ni decidirá sobre cualquier tema que no esté incluido en la agenda publicada con aviso de la reunión. Si un tema mencionado está en la agenda, la discusión del asunto se aplazará hasta el momento apropiado durante la reunión. Si el orador se desvía del tema indicado o se vuelve disruptivo o abusivo, se le dará una advertencia. Si se requiere de una segunda advertencia, entonces el orador perderá la asignación de tiempo restante. Los miembros de la Junta no tolerarán la interrupción de la reunión por parte de los miembros de la audiencia. Los miembros de la Junta han adoptado pólizas de quejas que están diseñados para asegurar una resolución pronta y equitativa de quejas y preocupaciones con un nivel administrativo menor. Estudiantes o padres pueden referirse a las siguientes quejas de estudiantes o padres a la póliza FNG. Los empleados pueden referirse a la póliza DGBA. Y los ciudadanos pueden referirse a la póliza GF. Copias de las pólizas del distrito están disponibles en el sitio web de McAllen ISD en mcallenisd.org.
We have 4 public speakers tonight. The first one, Sandra de la Rosa. Sandra, you'll be given 2 minutes. I will not interrupt you. You'll see the time clock, and you just stop when you get to that 2-minute point. If you just give us 1 moment before we start the... Are we ready? Go ahead, Mr. De La Rosa.
Dear Superintendent and Trustees, as we navigate the challenging task of budget cuts and restructuring, we want to express our unwavering support for preserving essential school resources, such as ESSER II funds, which are needed at the district level and not at the community level. We understand that these institutes serve as pillars of education, culture, and community engagement, providing invaluable opportunities for learning and enrichment to people of all ages. However, if you continue with these projects, it will have a negative effect on our school district that is already under financial constraint. We want to assure you that our community, along with our dedicated teachers, stand united in support of funding our school system. We believe that investing in education, culture, and community development is essential for the well-being and prosperity of McAllen and its residents, but not when it's going to affect your main priority, which is funding our schools for the betterment of our students and staff. As you deliberate on budgetary decisions, we urge you to consider the long-term impact of your choices on the fabric of our school system. Together, let's work towards finding alternative solutions that prioritize and the preservation of our invaluable school district. Thank you for your attention to this matter, and please know that we are here to support you in making decisions that serve the best interests of our district. Sincerely, McAllen AFT members.
Thank you, Mr. De La Rosa. Our next speaker this evening is Tracy Frey.
Good evening.
Good evening. Oh, go ahead. You can start when you start the call.
Sorry. Okay. Good evening, Superintendent and trustees. With the recent decision to eliminate 3 high school librarian positions in our district, it is deeply concerning, with rumors of further cuts circulating. Librarians are unsung heroes of our campuses, serving as media specialists, DOT staff, public relation officers, event specialists, emergency management team members, social media specialists, and webmasters. We are also makerspace experts and much more. Our roles have changed over the years, and we have embraced these changes. Our roles reach far beyond books. We play a pivotal role in academic achievement, fostering literacy and cultivating a vibrant culture of learning. Every major study in the past 20 years underscores librarians' indispensable role in influencing state scores and enriching the intellectual community of a school. The doors of our libraries never close, servicing thousands of students, parents, and staff. Let's not overlook the research that highlights librarians as the glue that holds the campus community together. As we face the possibility of further cuts, it's critical to recognize that librarians are not dispensable. We are the glue that hold the community together. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Frey. Our next speaker this evening, number 3, Beverly Avila.
Have any of you ever made future plans in your personal life and been forced to make changes or adjustments to those plans because of unexpected change in your income or expenditures? That is exactly what has happened to McAllen ISD. It does us no good to rehash and throw accusations about how this happened and why we're in this predicament. I respectfully ask the boards of MISD, IMUS, and Quinta, along with our city leaders, to consider the situation that our school district is in today. Today, we're talking about the livelihoods of our educators and the education of the future leaders of our community. Remember, the state has not increased per pupil funding since 2019, yet inflation has increased the cost of everything. Significant economic surplus and additional monies that districts across the state were expecting this year were not sent because of the governor's anger that private school vouchers did not pass. The state required local school districts to compress their tax rate. So McAllen went from $1.13 to $1, and the state did not replace that money with state funds, leaving us with a $6.5 million deficit this year and anticipating a $14 million deficit next year. McAllen ISD is suffering, as well as other districts throughout the state, which means our students are the ones affected by this. For the last 3 years, TEA advised superintendents to save monies in their fund balance to prepare for the ESSER cliff. MISD failed to do so. So forward to now, and McAllen ISD is faced with this major budget shortfall. McAllen ISD went from being an A-rated district to a B-rated district, going from 95 to an 87 for the 22-23 school year. How are teachers and aides supposed to fix the learning gaps that these students still have? The focus should be on trying to recapture these ESSER funds that will positively impact our students. Teachers, teacher aides, custodians, bus drivers, food service, and support personnel are the essential workers that students need at the campus. We hope the right thing is done by putting the money where it should be, in the hands of the McAllen ISD students and staff.
Thank you, Mrs. Avila. Our fourth and final speaker this evening is Sylvia Tanguma.
Good evening, Dr. Gutierrez and trustees. So some of the comments that I have heard are, I'm a single mom, I'm afraid of losing my job. I work with students with behavioral issues at 2 campuses, what am I gonna do now? These are all some of the comments that we have heard, along with our librarians that are being cut. I know that there is a recommendation to cut librarians and leave a library aide due to our budget shortfalls, right? So computer labs were closed effective today. That not only impacts us as teachers, it impacts the students of this community. And that is one thing that I want everyone to understand and make sure that you realize the impact that this is on. And I know it's no one's fault, just like Ms. Avila said. It's no one's fault, and it's nobody's fault that's in here. This didn't happen this year. It's been coming on for time. You know what? I have a whole bunch of things that I have to say, but I'm not going to say them because you've heard it, you've received emails, you know. My job here today is to represent my members because they elected me to represent them. And that's what I am here to do, to speak for them on their behalf as you were elected to speak for the students, for the staff, and of course for the community. So that is what we hope that you do, that you take that into consideration, because it's very aggravating to be at the campus level, to see a 5th grader that cannot read, that cannot multiply, because that is what we as teachers are facing. That is what we see. We are the ones at the campus that are seeing that, and nobody else is seeing that. That's what you need to take into consideration when you make your decisions about what is going to happen to us at the campus level. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tanguma. We are now at item 3, recess to closed session. The Board of Trustees may go into closed session pursuant to Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code to discuss the following. 3A, discussion with legal counsel regarding Keith Mazatlan and International Museum of Art and Science. At 5:15 p.m., the board will leave this room and go into closed session. It is 6:31 PM, and we are reconvening in open session. Item number 5, items in closed session. 5A, discussion and possible action regarding memorandum of understanding number 2022-118 with the City of McAllen's Discovery Center at Quintet Mazatlan.
Madam President, I move for our Board of Trustees to invoke paragraph D7 of the Memorandum of Understanding between the City of McAllen and McAllen Independent School District dated September 16, 2021, and initiate mediation in an effort to reach an amicable resolution with our community partner.
Second.
It's been moved by Trustee Rivera, second by Trustee Saldivar. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. Let the record reflect that 6 were in the affirmative and 1 Trustee Aliceda was in the negative. Item 5B, discussion and possible action regarding resolution and agreement number 2022-160 McAllen ISD wing at the International Museum of Arts and Science.
Madam President, if I may, I move that the Board of Trustees terminate the contract invoking the 30-day clause in the contract with the International Museum of Arts and Science and reallocate the district funds designated for it to address internal student and staff educational needs within McAllen ISD.
Second.
It's been moved by Trustee Saldivar and second by Trustee Peña to terminate the contract involving the 30-day clause in the contract with the International Museum of Arts and Science and reallocate the district funds designated for it to address internal student and staff educational needs within McAllen ISD. Any further discussion? What say you, Board?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I did that wrong. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-2 with Trustee Kittleman and Trustee Aliceda voting in the negative.
Madam President, I invoke the roll call, please. Roll call vote.
Trustee Delgado, how do you vote on this?
Aye.
In the affirmative. Trustee Rivera?
Affirmative.
Trustee Peña?
Affirmative.
Trustee Aliceda, negative. Trustee Saldivar?
An affirmative, yes.
Trustee Kittleman?
Negative.
Trustee De La Garza Lopez?
Affirmative, yes.
The motion passes 5-2.
Thank you.
We are on next to item number 6, discussion and possible action of the 23-24 list of certified Texas Teacher Evaluation and Support System TTAS appraisers. Dr. Gutierrez.
Yes, the Board of Trustees annually approves a list of certified teacher appraisers. Administration is recommending action on this item.
What say you, Board?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Trustee Peña, second by Trustee Delgado. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We are now at item 7, 2024-2025 second budget workshop. Dr. Gutierrez.
Yes, the Texas Education Agency and Board Policy CE local requires districts to prepare a budget of anticipated expenditures and revenues before the June 19th and approved by the board by June 30th. We have a couple of, we have a presentation, first of all, from TASB to do the staff study overview. And we have in the audience Ms. Karen Dooley from TASB that will be presenting on the staff study. Ms. Dooley here? Yes. Go ahead, ma'am.
Can we go back to?
Ms. Dooley, can you hold off there? There's
Which item are you looking at? Which agenda item?
Yes, we can. We have a request to go back to item 5. Trustee Kittleman would like to say something.
I need to drink water.
Okay, that was a really difficult decision for me to make as a new trustee, and I'm trying to keep it together and strong because, and we all had a really intense conversation. And I want to reiterate to our community partners that we're about to, when you guys leave, we're about to have conversations of absorbing over 260 positions for a district, including librarians, counselors, and many other positions that are so necessary for our instruction. And this is a really tough spot to be in. And I just want to reiterate how much I value, we all value our partnership with the city. we want to continue to work together and to support each other while also honoring all of our teachers and educators who are here, who email us very regularly and communicate their needs, not having desks and having to buy their own paper and pencils and all of these things. And I know this seems like a very, very tough decision for me personally because I value my community partners so much, as I know everyone else does, and it's hard to know what the right decision is. But before you guys all went, I just wanted to say how much thank you for the community and the teachers for showing up and letting us know what your priorities are, because it helps us move forward. And really, I just want to say this is the hardest decision I've made. And I don't take it lightly. I did my best to try to look into, try to research every single component and come prepared for this. And I still feel not unprepared.
You're doing a fantastic job, Trustee.
That's all. So.
Thank you, Trustee Kittleman. We're now at item 7, the 24-25 second budget workshop.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Gutierrez. It's always a pleasure to be in McAllen ISD and to work with the McAllen ISD staff. I'm Karen Dooley from TASB HR Services, and I am one of the assistant directors there, and I am here to present the staffing review that I conducted for the school district a little bit earlier this spring. I understand positions in school districts, being in public education for 29 years before retiring and then working at TASB since 2016. I went through a similar situation, I'll say the 2011-12 school year, if any of you remember that school year and the tough the decisions that had to be made that school year. And this is reminding me of that as I've been presenting these in school districts across the state this year, and the team that do staffing reviews as well are having to stand in front of school boards like this and in front of employees and provide this information. And it is information, and there are recommendations, but we're trying to give information to the decision makers of the school district to work through the budget issues that they are experiencing, and we're doing it through data. And so I hope that you see that as we move forward. So the review itself, the data collection part was staff leaders in the district were given questionnaires to complete for us or to complete for me that ask information, that ask questions, and then they had to gather some data as well. I did conduct virtual interviews with the principals. I had last semester in the fall worked with the district leaders on the HR review, and so I'd already met with them, and so I just used their questionnaires for the feedback in the staffing review piece. The next part was the analysis, and we can slice and dice that pie as many ways as we possibly can to provide that data that decision makers need moving forward. And so there are some peer comparisons that were conducted. There's benchmark comparisons where we use organizational standards. We use what we call common practice in Texas, which is based on some state averages or just on trends that happen across the state as we go year to year conducting these staffing reviews. And then finally, we build models for improvement that align with benchmarks and that even address needs. So this isn't, we don't look at our staffing reviews as being something that is put out there to find cuts for districts. That's not what we're about. We're about aligning with benchmarks, aligning with peer comparisons, aligning with organizational standards, and addressing needs as those also reveal themselves through the process. So the benchmarking, why benchmark? It gives a district a good look at themselves. They can see what others are accomplishing when we do those peer reviews, and then hopefully help them prioritize their efforts, especially when you're dealing with budget deficits. And it's important to be able to prioritize where you're able to make those adjustments within your staffing in order to help you meet your budget goals that you have. What benchmarks were used? We, like I said, peer comparison, and most of the peer comparisons are using the HR Services Salary Survey that we conduct at the beginning of each year, and we get those results by December. And so for y'all's district, I actually used the current data from this year on those peer comparisons. The organizational standards, they're the Elementary Principals Association, Secondary Principals Association, Counseling Association, the Association of Physical Plant Administrators in the auxiliary areas as well. And then, like I said, common practice in Texas are those benchmarks that we've established that we put out each year as we move into the new school year. We evaluate the data at that point and put out new benchmarks. So district details. This is a 5-year review of the enrollment. You can see that there's been an enrollment change over the last 5 years of 10.8%, a decline in enrollment. And I totally agree with the individuals that stood up here and said the state did not give new money. There's lots of things, the ESSER cliff and so forth, are all those things that are working against districts this school year. But in addition to that, the declining enrollment is also something that's present for McAllen ISD. And so projection for next year is 19,587 students. This projection was rolling up students from one grade level to the next and then having a -1% decrease in enrollment. And that was the figure that it came out to by doing that. Or I did I guess I did zero growth. Sorry about that. I thought I did a -1, the zero growth. So. Y'all had 2 different peer districts for this review. The first peer district is the standard one that we do with school districts when we do these reviews, and it's the state peer districts. It's where we take your enrollment range and then look at your student demographics and focus on districts that mirror you across the state. And so you can see the list of peer districts there that were your state peers. The next group was the local peers. These were districts that are down in your area. The enrollment with these groups vary from district to district. Therefore, we have to be careful whenever we're doing these types of peer comparisons because I can't use averages with local peers like I can with state peers because of the variance in enrollment. But what we do for those peer comparisons is we do break things down to per 1,000 students. And so it levels the playing field when you do that. So if you have a district that's much larger than you and we take the area that we're evaluating and make it per 1,000 students, then it evens out that comparison. And so summaries of findings and options. In the report, all the positions across the school district, all the areas, the departments, the campuses, and so forth were evaluated. But in the end, the summary of findings just focuses on where there are some sort of recommendation. And so in curriculum and instruction, the recommendation is to determine if adjustments are needed in the curriculum and instruction department based on comparisons. So McAllen ISD averages 3 curriculum and instruction staff per 1,000 students compared to the state peer district average, which was 2.6. And then when McAllen ISD is compared to the local peer district average. The local average was 1.4 positions, and that's per 1,000 students on both of those, the 2.6 and the 1.4, and 3 for McAllen ISD. The number of curriculum and instruction staff averages 2.2 per 1,000 students for all districts in the enrollment range of 20 to 40,000 students. So all the districts that participated in the salary survey that were in that enrollment range, we also capture that data and provide that information just as a third comparison. For assistant principals, consider adjustments to the assistant principal staffing. The benchmark is 1 position per 450 students. The district average was 1 to 422.2 students. The secondary campuses are staffed at 1 per 390.2, and the elementary campuses are staffed at 1 per 471.2. One secondary assistant principal position could be redirected to an elementary campus that is 1 position below that ratio. And then additional cost savings could be realized if assistant principal staffing was adjusted at the alternative campus with campuses with enrollment of less than 100 students. For counselors, consider adjustments to the counseling staff. This benchmark is 1 position per 350 students. The district averages 1 counselor per 277.6 students. I can tell you, I know that was an initiative several years back, and the staffing is reflective of that. And I know that because I conducted a staffing review actually here about 3 or 4 years ago. And I know that in those interviews and so forth and working with the district, that was an initiative. It was a priority that the district had. And so that staffing is still reflective of that. The elementary campuses are staffed at 1 counselor per 426.3 students. The district staffs 3.4 counseling positions per 1,000 students compared to the state peer district average of 2.4 and the local peer district average of 3.1. This option would result in the absorption of up to 20 counseling positions across the district based on the ratio of 1 to 350. Additional cost savings could be realized if social worker position was adjusted to reduce the variance between the state and local peers. So library staff consider adoption of the alternate library staffing model. The district employs 1 library staff to 459.5 students. The model would absorb 6 librarians and add 1 library aide. The district staffs 2 positions per 1,000 students compared to 1.5 for the state peer district average and 2.1 for the local peer district average. The model staffs campuses with enrollment greater than 1,000 with a librarian and 2 aides. Campuses with enrollment between 750 to 1,000 students are staffed with a librarian and an aide. Campuses with less than 750 students but more than 400 are staffed with a librarian, and campuses with 400 or less students are staffed with a library aide. So there's an intentional staffing model there that could be considered as you work through those numbers. Clinic staff consider adoption of the alternate clinic staffing model. The district employs 1 clinic staff to 562.9 students. The model would absorb 6 RN positions, add 6 LVN positions, and add 4 clinic and aide positions. The district staffs 1.7 positions per 1,000 students compared to 1.6 for the state peer district average and 1.8 for the local peer district average. Again, it's using a model based on enrollment of those campuses. The staffing model for McAllen High, Memorial High, Rowe would remain. Campuses with 750 to 1,000 students would be staffed with an RN and a clinic aide. Campuses between 400 and 750 would be staffed with an RN, and campuses with less than 400 would be staffed with an LVN. This model corrects the variance between McAllen ISD and both sets of peer districts. In this information that I just covered for the professional staff, it shows then these are estimates, conservative estimates for cost, $1.4 million with the counselors, $405,000 for librarians, and $330,000 for RNs. And then I'll pick up the paraprofessional or support staff here in just a few minutes. For campus clerical, consider absorption of up to 27 campus clerical positions. The benchmark is 5.5 per 1,000 students at the secondary campuses and 4.5 per 1,000 students for the elementary campuses. The secondary campuses are staffed with 84 positions compared to the benchmark of 63.5. The elementary campuses are staffed with 50 positions compared to a benchmark of 40. Enrollment should be monitored to determine when an additional clerical position should be added. Keeping track of what's going on with enrollment is extremely important because that's what we base those benchmarks on. Absorptions include 19 positions at the secondary campuses and 8 at the elementary campuses. The next one is the non-campus clerical. Consider the absorption of up to 37 non-campus clerical positions. This benchmark is 3 positions per 1,000 students. For McAllen ISD's enrollment, it's 59 positions, and the district currently staffs 96 positions. An evaluation of district departments would need to be completed or conducted to determine the areas for adjustments. The next one is educational aides. Consider absorption of up to 113 educational aides. The benchmark is 15.6 positions per 1,000 students, and it does include general and special education students. This recommendation includes adjustments made to library staff, clinic staff, and special education. The district is currently staffed at 127 positions above the benchmark. Here's the cost and savings in that area. The clinic aides would cost around $90,000, library aid $22,500. Then you see the 2.5 for educational aides, 1.5 for non-campus clerical, and $877,000 for campus clerical. For special education, consider the addition of 4 special education teachers and 13 special education aides. State average is 1 special education teacher per 15 special education students and 1 staff, including aides, for every 7 special education students. McAllen ISD employs 1 special education teacher per 17.1, so they are understaffed in that comparison, and 1 staff, including aides, to every 7.8 special education students. And so with program benchmarks, you can see that this would be, there's the benchmarks that we use at the high school, middle school, elementary. At resource inclusion would be -4 teachers, but the addition of 33 aides. Life skills autism was +6 teachers with the absorption of 15 aides. And then early childhood special education was the addition of 2 teachers and absorption of 5 aides by each program per campus. Speech staff, state average is a caseload of 1 speech staff per 45 to 50 students. The district currently is staffed at 1 to 63.5. The addition would reduce the caseload to 52.8, so closer to that benchmark level. And the district could consider SLPs or speech assistants in order to reduce that variance. And there is your cost in that area for special education or special education services for the district. Elementary teachers, consider the addition of 7 elementary teachers. The state average for elementary classrooms ranges from 18.6 to 20.2. The district's general education classes currently average 20.3 per class. The bilingual classrooms average 19 students per class. This recommendation maximizes the multilingual instructional model that is already present at some of the campuses. Middle school teachers, you could consider absorption of up to 24 middle school teachers through attrition. The middle school campuses have a current average of 21 students per class, which is below the benchmark range, and a theoretical average of 20.9, and they are running the 8-6 master schedule. This will provide an overall average of 22 students per class, so we're just talking 1 more student per class compared to the current class average. Additional savings could result from a 23-to-1 up to 36 positions, or at the high end of the benchmark range of 24 students per class would be 46 positions. You could also consider a master schedule change for the middle school. They're currently on the 8-6, which means students attend 8 periods per day, teachers teach 6 periods per day, all teachers get a conference period and an additional planning period. The middle school campuses operate that 8-6 master schedule. All teachers receive the required conference plus the additional planning. This proposed master schedule would provide a additional planning period for all the core teachers, so math, science, social studies, and ELAR, but all elective teachers would get just the required conference period. And this results in the absorption of up to 44 positions at a 22-to-1 class size ratio. High school is similar. This is 17 high school teacher positions through attrition that you could absorb. The high school campuses have a current average of 21.2, and the theoretical average is 20.9 whenever inefficiencies are removed from that master schedule, and they are on an 8-6 master schedule as well. This is for the 22 students per class, and additional savings could be realized from the 23.5-to-1 and the 25 at the top of the benchmark range. And again, they could consider a master schedule change to the 8.6.5, similar to what was just recommended for the middle schools. This would result in absorption of up to 48 positions. And I'll say an 8.6 master schedule is a very expensive master schedule to offer. It's great if you can afford it, but many districts across the state have had to go at least to the 6.5 to try to meet their budgets, or even go to an 8.7 or a 7.6 master schedule. Athletics, you could consider the alternate athletic staffing model. The high school is staffed at 15.3 athletes to coach. The change of 33 athletic period assignments to academic period assignments would increase the ratio to 19.1, closer to that student to teacher average at the campuses. The middle school is staffed at 30.9 athletes to coach. The change of 11 academic periods to athletic periods would decrease it to 26.1. So they were well above the class size average, and the high schools were below the class size average. The goal is to align student athletes to coach ratio to the campus student to teacher ratio. And there's your cost savings of the teachers. And then the additional for the master schedule change above the amount right here, the 1.4 and the 1 million, is an additional 1.189 and an additional 1.843 if you were to change to that 8.6.5 master schedule. Custodial, consider absorption of up to 26 custodial positions through attrition. The APP standard is 1 custodian per 23,000 cleanable square feet. The district is currently staffed at 1 custodian per 19,045 cleanable square feet. McAllen ISD staff 7.8 custodial staff per 1,000 students compared to the state peer district average of 7.4 and the local peer district average of 8.7. Child nutrition, you could consider absorption of up to 11 child nutrition positions. The optimum meals per labor hour that we're looking for when we conduct a review of meals per labor hour is 70%. The secondary campuses, 3 secondary campuses and 13 elementary campuses were below this efficiency level, meaning that they fell below the 70%. The absorption of 86 labor hours, which is equivalent to 11 positions, would improve efficiency. McAllen ISD staffs 9.9 child nutrition staff per 1,000 students compared to the state peer district average of 8.5 and the local average of 8.8. And there's your cost and savings for those programs. And so total cost and savings, you've got the addition of 1.396 million, the absorption of 10.4 for a total of 9.1 millions in savings. And then with a secondary master schedule changes, it would bump it up to 12.1 million in savings. So planning. These are recommendations only. It's just to provide you a menu of items as you move forward through your budget process and looking at your budget goals, looking at how those align with your district's mission and vision and what you're seeking to accomplish for your district. So recommendations only. We hope that the district leadership and the board can work together to work through these numbers and do what you need to do that's in the best interest of the district when it comes to your budget. We only recommend through attrition to reduce, which means you've got a position available, nobody's in it, or you've got a position that you know that you want to reduce, but somebody's in it, but there's a vacancy that they can move to. Obviously, we want it to be through attrition, if at all possible, and avoid a RIF process. Gradual implementation, it's not something that can possibly happen from this year to next year. It's probably going to happen gradually, unfortunately. It took 2 years plus a RIF for me to get to the point of balancing back in 11, 12, and 12, 13, unfortunately. And I hope that y'all have better luck than I did of having to do a RIF because those aren't comfortable. And then utilize district and campus staffing plans moving forward using using benchmarks, using the guidelines that are provided in order to make sure that you can make adjustments with whatever happens with enrollment. My hope is that you would start to gain in enrollment, but if you don't, if you stabilize or if you're continuing to decline enrollment, that you're able to make your adjustments across the board based on the staffing guidelines. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Dooley. Do you have any questions for her?
No, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Okay. We now move on to the second part of our presentation, and that is going to be Ms. Lorena Garcia. We are going to cover actually items 2 through 10 now with our PowerPoint. So we're going to go item by item from number 2, staff guidelines, to number 3, compensation plan, number 4, budget preparation challenges, number 5, budget timeline, number 6, budget savings committee, number 7, student enrollment projections, number 8, student attendance, number 9, budget reduction plan that we have, and number 10, fund balance report. So all of those items 2 through 10 will be now combining the presentation that Ms. Lorena Garcia has in this PowerPoint that's coming up. Go ahead, Ms. Garcia.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Gutierrez. Today we're going to cover these items for our second budget workshop, and we have a wealth of information for you, part of which you've already received from TASB's staffing review. This information that we provide impacts our staffing, and we understand that there's some challenges and it's a difficult process to implement. However, the ultimate final goal is the preservation of human capital. We want to also make sure that as a result that we protect our instructional programs, and ultimately we want to be able to provide a competitive compensation plan for our staff to make sure that we're able to continue to recruit high quality and staff and also retain them. So with that, I will start with the draft changes to the staffing guidelines. These staffing guidelines, our district has a staffing compensation book, which each of you have received a copy, and that is the entire book. What we have done, the team has put together this PowerPoint to include any updates that are proposed at this time. As you may note, this PowerPoint and staffing changes are all in draft form. This is something that is fluid as we move forward. We just received in late February the TASB staffing review, and we're now meeting with our administration, our superintendent, and working on ways to implement them. The final compensation plan will be provided to the board and the public in June when we approve our budget. So between now and then, it will continue to be in draft form. So the very first change that we have is, as you noticed on Ms. Dooley's presentation, one of the things that she recommended was that we align our social worker staffing. And there's an opportunity to do so because we have 2 vacancies. So by reducing the social workers through attrition, which is those 2 vacancies, we're able to save $115,000. In addition to that, it was recommended that we reduce through attrition 17, and there's one more at a non-Title I campus, K-12 early learning literacy interventionist positions. And we currently have 2 vacancies, and that's a savings of over $1 million. We're also recommending reducing through attrition 1 instructional coach, reading interventionist, and that's funded by 211. It's a savings of $65,067. So total savings on this slide, if those recommendations are taken into account, it's 1.189981, 1.1 million. The draft changes that impact high school, so far what we've noted is that there's an opportunity to reduce through attrition 2 computer lab aides at the secondary level, at the high schools. The savings would be $46,182, and if you recall, there was 113 instructional aides that are being recommended by TASB that we reduce through attrition, and this would be part of that. Specialists for college and career readiness, there's one at each comprehensive high school, and that would be a savings of $208,304,000. Specialists for social emotional learning, there's also one at each comprehensive high school, and that is a savings of $195,006. Total savings on this slide would be $449,492. As discussed in the TASB staffing review, the recommendation for the school clinics is that elementary schools with less than 400 be staffed with a licensed vocational nurse. Currently, there's only one campus that fits that criteria. However, keep in mind that these staffing guidelines, they're all based on enrollment. So as enrollment continues to change, then the recommendation would also be applied based on that enrollment for projected enrollment for next year in this case. Elementary and middle schools with enrollment between 750 and 1,000, they are recommending that we add a clinic aide. And so based on their recommendation, we need 4 additional cost of about $100,000. We are working with Dr. Olivares to see if special state and federal can pick up some of that cost, and that would relieve from 199. High school staffing, they are recommending that remain the same. So total cost because of the increase is actually $43,007. In the library, as she covered, they are recommending staffing a librarian and 2 aides for campuses over 1,000. Staff a librarian and 1 aide for campuses 750 but less than 1,000. And staff a librarian for campuses above 400 but less than 750. Staff an aide for campuses with less than 400 students. So approximate savings based on the current enrollment is $158,800. So if you were to take the totals from the previous slides and this slide, the grand total for that is 1.75 million. And these are the numbers that I've been calling out. In addition to that, we are, of course, recommending, as the district has been having conversations throughout the year with the ESSER-funded positions that the grant is ending at the end of the year, and those positions will not continue. So we provided a chart here for your review of the various remaining ESSER-funded positions, and there's about 45 of them for a total of 1.8 million. So these positions would be removed from the staffing guidelines for next year. Now moving on to the compensation plan. The compensation plan not only provides us with the salary plan for the staff, but that will come later at a future meeting, but it also provides information regarding the stipends, the hourly rates, the substitute rates, and so we're going to cover some of the changes that are being recommended. These changes are recommended based on sitting down with the different program directors and reviewing with their supervisors. The very first one is advanced academics, and what that is, that's a change going from on-ramps for dual enrollment. We have the similar change for South Texas College dual teachers. They're going from $100 per section to $150. And then in red, you see the approximate budget impact for that. And all of this is in the complete book. However, like I said, we took only the sections that were changing and placed those on the PowerPoint. For athletics, we are recommending that the extra days, they're currently capped at $270 per day. We are recommending that those be increased to $300 per day for a total cost of $52,149.94. For dual enrollment, again, but this is in career and technical education, both of those, advanced academics and career and technical, are aligning to be consistent. The stipend per semester going from $100 to $150. In the area of extra duty pay, so This is for teachers participating in a district-sponsored Saturday or after-school training session during the school year. So for 2 hours, the recommendation is going from $27 to $50. For 4 hours, from $40 to $75. And for 6 hours, from $80 to $100. Professional and degreed certified is going from $23 to $28. Professional, degreed, and certified is going from $25 to also $28. The Fine Arts program, there was a position for Fine Arts Theater Director at Amar, which remained vacant, so that one is being removed from the book. In addition to that, there are some increases in stipends. Mariachi Director is increasing from $8,500 to $9,500, and the days are increasing from 15 to 20. Mariachi Assistant Director, the recommendation is to go from $7,500 to $8,500. Conjunto Tejano program is another program that remain unfilled, so that one is being removed from the compensation plan. Dance and Folklorico is moving from $7,000 to $8,000. That is the recommendation. And Assistant Orchestra Directors, it's based on enrollment, and we have 2 currently there. For grant-funded positions, state and federal programs, the Teacher Coach Literacy Fund 211 stipend, there's a stipend that's currently being paid out of ESSER funds. So now Fund 211 would be picking up that stipend. And there on the right-hand side, you see an explanation of the number of positions, and it's a tiered stipend based on years of experience. Instructional coach, reading interventionist, K through 5. There's 1 position, and this one is being eliminated through attrition. The content specialist teacher, there's 10 positions, and it's going from 5,000. It's actually being reduced to 3,000. And there's 12 positions currently. For regional day school program for the deaf, strategists, we are going from 2 strategists to 1, and 1 is now going to be the supervisor, and that is being added. And these are changes that are situational dependent. So this is for special duty assignments, and the yearly stipend is changing for, the top one is Secondary Science and Engineering Fair Campus Coordinator. It's $250 for 1/3, $350 for 2/3, $450 for 3/3, and this would be for participation. And if $200 if they proceed to state or international competitions. Secondary Science Olympiad Coach is going to $650 for regional, $350 for state, and $350 for nationals. And the same goes for Secondary Science Olympiad Assistant Coach. However, those amounts are $350 for regional, $200 for state, and $200 for national. And continuing on to the special duty assignments, we currently have 70 campus technology facilitators, and the recommendation is that we add 5 more to that, and we convert, we leave 44 to do the CTF function, and then 31 be assigned media technology facilitator, and that would be working with the social media and the website for a $1,000 stipend. The district UIL and / chess coordinator was formerly 1 person, and those duties are being split into 2. $3,000 for the UIL coordinator and $2,500 for the chess coordinator. The teacher, the reading teacher, which is Fund 99 for our non-Title I campus, there was a stipend that was being paid out of ESSER, and it will now have to be picked up by 199. This is for Gonzales Elementary, and it's also a tiered stipend. There's currently only one teacher at this level for $3,600. For special education program, we have some increases in stipend. The reason for that is to stay competitive, and these are very hard to fill positions. So the recommendation on the special ed teacher self-contained is to go from $1,200 to $1,500. Special education teacher, 1,000, currently at 1,000 is recommended to go to 1,200. For special education early childhood, 1,200 is now recommended that it be paid at 1,500. The diagnostician is recommended to go from 1,000 to 1,500, and there's currently 28 individuals in that position. For school psychologists, the recommendation is to go from 1,000 to 1,500. Speech pathologists, there's an increase in the amount of individuals receiving that stipend. Currently, that's 19. Speech assistant is 7. Behavior specialists, the recommendation is to go from $1,000 stipend to $1,200. And then the Strides teacher self-contained recommendation is to go from $1,200 to $1,500. Speech pathologist with masters is the number of individuals in that position is changing. It's currently at 19, and speech assistant therapist is currently at 7. Continuing with special education, the lead school psychologist, the title is changing. Lead behavior strategist, we currently have one person at a $2,500 stipend, and lead diagnostician, one individual at $2,500. The adapted physical education for Special Olympics, it's recommended that that stipend go from $1,500 to $1,800. For the American Sign Language Society, we have up to 6 possible stipends if the campuses choose to open it up at the high schools, and that's a yearly stipend of $600. For prose or poetry, that is being combined into one stipend. And for solo acting, that is an addition at $700. The spelling bee, there's 6 positions, 1 per middle school, and that's 600,000.
600.
600, I'm so sorry.
They start to get to.
Yes, I got a little crazy there on the spending.
We're talking lots of money.
I know. Spelling bee, yes. In the elementary, we have 18 positions at $600.
I'm following you.
You're doing great, by the way.
I was just checking to see if y'all were paying attention.
Did we pass? Did we pass?
So for the athletic programs, what they did is they went ahead and added a non-degree category. They added the instructional assistant for the middle school summer recreation program at $10.25. We also have our evening study center rates. Part-time teacher, day evening classes out of district is $28. And then part-time educator, non-degree, day and evening classes is going from $8 recommended to be $15. There is an ESSER-funded position, part-time intern technician technology support, and since ESSER is no longer going to be funding that position, that $12 an hour rate is being removed. ESSER student recruiter as well is also being removed from the compensation plan. Part-time intern support for special ed at $12.50 is also being deleted. The part-time MITV videographer technician, it's recommended that that be paid at an hourly rate of $19 an hour, as well as the part-time educator degreed. And for substitutes, administration is recommending an increase to the substitute rates. Formerly, the full-day substitute rate is $80, and we are recommending that it go to $90, an additional $10 for 11-plus days in the same job for the long-term subs. For the full-day teacher, 60-plus college hours or degreed, it's currently at $100, and we are recommending that be increased to $110. And from, for the long-term sub, from $110 to $120. And the other rates are remaining the same. So that concludes the portion on the compensation plan and the staffing guidelines. We'll now move on to the rest of the presentation. There are quite a bit of challenges that we have had to deal with, and they've been mentioned several times, and including tonight. The very first one is that the basic allotment has not changed. Inflation rates have gone up 19 to 20%. However, the legislature, the last time they made a change to the basic allotment was 2019. So we're dealing with these formulas since 2019, yet our cost for providing education has increased substantially since then. Another challenge that we face is that the additional state funding is on hold. In the recent legislation, the state budget actually appropriated $48.6 billion in foundation school program state aid, which is a decrease of $3 billion from the previous state budget. The state also appropriated $4 billion for additional school funding, and there have been 4 special sessions by the governor and still no additional funding for public schools. So that's another challenge that we're having to work with, no new money. And then we did talk about the SHARS adjustment that currently that's under review. We have appealed that, and we are bracing ourselves in case there is a reduction in our SHARS benefits. Our settlement, our final settlement could possibly be reduced by $1.4 million, and we're currently waiting to hear back from the state on that. But we do have a plan. So we brought some good news for you. The team, under the direction of Dr. Gutierrez, has been working, and this is a very large team. So I would like to acknowledge all of my colleagues and all of our department directors and campus principals that have contributed to this plan. As you recall, the first budget workshop, we did talk about the budget deficit, that we're projecting it at $14 million. So we have a budget reduction committee, and in future slides I will share with you who's on that committee and what are some other suggestions. But during that work that we've been doing in our meetings, we came up with approximately $4.7 million in reduction ideas. So taking that and subtracting it, that leaves us a cumulative balance of $9.3 million. In addition to that, we have another committee, which is the reduction in software and programs. And they have been also hard at work, and to date have found at least $1.5 million in software programs that can be reduced to help towards reducing the deficit, bringing it down to 7.8. We are also recommending that we continue with the department and campus budget cuts. The 8% cuts would net about another $1 million savings, bringing the deficit down to $6.8 million. On February 9th, there were some staff reassignments, and these were all based on the recommendations of the TASB staffing review. There were some vacancies, and there were some positions that were recommended that be eliminated through attrition, and that staff was reassigned into those positions. That was a total of approximately $800,000. That takes us now to a budget deficit of $6 million. I will also share with you a plan to eliminate some vacancies within the central office, child nutrition program, and custodial, closing these vacancies since currently there are no employees, and they are positions that have been recommended by TASB to be closed through attrition. And that is a total of approximately $1 million. And I'll share with you what those positions are. But first, we're going to review the budget timeline. In January, we started working on this with our preliminary revenue projections. Everybody received the budget development calendar, and we started working with TASB to request a staffing study, which was received in late February. In February, we held our first budget workshop on February 12th, and we also initiated the Budget Savings Committee meetings. And we've met at least twice already. And then we had the administrative review of the TASB study. In March, we are planning on holding, well, today, on March 4th, the second budget workshop, but tentatively, we are looking at March 26th for a third budget workshop where we would review employee benefits. The staffing study will be reviewed on Wednesday with the directors and the principals, and this is already set on our calendars. We will also provide budget development trainings for principals this month of March, and then we will continue meeting with the Budget Savings Committee. As a matter of fact, today some new ideas came to fruition, so we can't wait to share those with you. In April, we are recommending to have our fourth budget workshop on April 15th. We'll be running, this is when we start looking at actual pay scenarios and position budgeting, so it's getting very close to the final numbers. We will run also our self-funded plan projections and finalize the input of all non-payroll related budgets. In May, we will have our fifth budget workshop and then hold a board meeting. Board agenda items for May are the public meeting date for the budget, the proposed tax rate that will be published in the newspaper. And then we are recommending also having a sixth budget workshop on May 29th, where we will provide you with the annual budget book draft and the almost final compensation plan. On June 2024, we will post for the proposed budget for 2024-25 fiscal year on our website, and then we'll hold a special meeting for the public hearing for the budget and the tax rate, and the board will then adopt the budget, and the tax rate will be adopted in September. So that is the timeline that we're working with. As you recall, we talked about the Budget Savings Committee. These are the individuals that are members of that committee. We have representation from every level, our campus principals. Of course, our superintendent is leading the cause. And then we have members of the executive leadership team. We also have department representatives from the different areas that a lot of the departments that have either a lot of staffing or a good portion of the expenditures run through them. Some of our extracurricular programs as well are represented there. Here are some of the ideas. First of all, the Board of Trustees approved the optional flexible school day program, and there are other efforts that the district is working on for improving attendance. We are estimating about $1 million in gain in revenue with those attendance programs. We are also proposing eliminating the K through second ELI early literacy interventionists through attrition, and that's $1.3 million. Reducing substitute costs by 20% by reducing teacher pullouts and trainings. So if we work more efficiently with how we do our professional development, we would be able to save on substitute costs. That 20% is about $747,237 based on what we spent this past year. Another thing that we had already talked about was balancing the elementary classrooms. Early on, at the beginning of the year, that's about $505,000. Eliminate through attrition orchestra assistants. There's 2 orchestra assistants at the middle schools. Currently, we have not met the staffing ratios to qualify for 2. However, we have 2 employed. So if there's a vacancy, let's say at a high school assistant, then we would be able to move through attrition 1 or even both of those assistants. The total of $148,000. Reduce overtime for departments. We looked at the central office departments, and the overtime expense for those totals is $1.5 million. And keep in mind that this includes bus drivers, police officers. So that's why the number is kind of high. So 20% reduction would be well, actually, we had set a goal of 20%, but then we said we decided 200,000 was a better goal, a more attainable goal. Eliminating through attrition the EQ specialist, we've already mentioned that, and that's a total of 224,258. And in our budget reduction committee, we did have the chief of police, and a couple of suggestions that he brought to the table were using the police officers to assist with the truancy efforts. And by doing so, possibly we could eliminate through attrition 2 attendance officers at 210,815. He also recommended working with the schedules of the police officers to reduce overtime at a sum of about $150,000. Reducing staff travel, this is for the central office departments. We're estimating a reduction of 76,477. And then reducing field trips. So currently there's 3 grade levels that are attending the museum field trips, the Quinta field trips, and the Valley Symphony Orchestra. So reducing it to 1 grade level possibly could net some savings as well. So that brings us to about 4.6, 4.7 savings. And I'll now pass it to Dr. De Hoyos on the software savings.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The instructional service directors compose this committee along with our fine arts director, our athletic director, and our marketing director. And so what you see here is a combined list of softwares and programs that have either not given us the return of our investments or they have served a duplicate service. So we have made the decision that these softwares or programs, we will no longer be using them next year. And so that gives us a savings of more than $1.5 million.
And there is a committee also that is separate from the savings committee, just looking at the software programs, that Dr. De Hoyos is leading that committee.
We also mentioned that we are looking, of course, at all areas, and central office being one of them. The very first phase is looking at the vacancies that are at central office and eliminating those that are being recommended for elimination through attrition. Very first one is an assistant superintendent vacancy that was closed. Clerical, administrative clerical position, and also 2 clerical positions in the purchasing department that are currently vacancies. We have a vacancy for a communication officer. In addition to that, we have a dispatcher vacancy at transportation and a producer vacancy at MITV. There's a secretary vacancy at facilities maintenance operation and a paraprofessional accounting specialist, student recruiter vacancy, and a teacher coach English learner at the district level in bilingual. So a total, if we were to total those up, the savings for next year would be approximately $568,000, and this does not include benefits, it's just base salary. TASB also recommended that we look at our custodial and our child nutrition program staffing. Currently, we have several vacancies in this area, and if we total those vacancies up, the savings is approximately $395,000. So if you take the 2 slides together and add that, cumulative total is 9.6 million, approximately close to $1 million. It would actually be over if we were to include the benefits. Now we're going to look at enrollment over time. Since 2016, we've provided a chart with enrollment and also the total staff and the total number of teachers in the 4th column. A very popular ratio that districts use to measure staffing is student to staff FTE ratio and also student to teacher ratio. So we've included that. As you can see, over time, the ratio has decreased, meaning that we are staffing more staff per student. If we were to look at the projections in enrollment for 2025, we are estimating about a 500 student enrollment drop. So that's 19,595. So based on that number, what would be the appropriate staffing level if we wanted to stay at the 2024 staffing ratio? For example, total staff, student to total staff of 5.87. In order to do that, we would have to eliminate at least 86 positions. Now, that's staying at the current ratio, keeping in mind that this year was funded partially with ESSER positions and ESSER funding. Next year, we won't have that. So we actually want to do a little bit better than that. So, but currently, we've already eliminated or identified 45 positions that have been eliminated through attrition. So that leaves us 41 more to go within the 86 that we identified. And this is a graphical interpretation of the data on the previous slide. As you can see, the orange line is all staff and the blue is enrollment. And you can tell where in 2016, 17, 18, even 2019, they were very close to each other. They were trailing each other. But then the gap started getting wider and wider. Why? Well, because we were going through the pandemic. During the pandemic, there was additional support that was needed, and there was funding available through federal funds through ESSER to provide that additional support to mitigate the learning loss because of the pandemic. So additional staff was added. However, that funding's going away, so we cannot continue on that same trend line. And then we also wanted to share with you a historical table of student attendance. As you can see, pre-pandemic, we were at about 95% attendance, and we're now at 93%. And of course, average daily attendance is used to calculate our state entitlements. So it's very important that we have a good attendance. And then the last slide that we have for you is a history of our unassigned fund balance. And as you can see, our current 23-24 fund balance unassigned, we started the year beginning July 1st at 58 million, and there was an increase of 20 million. This was from the uncommitted ESSER funds. So the unassigned fund balance is projected to be 78 million, and that's a total of 112 days. And we are projecting, with the $14 million deficit, to end at 64,579,313, which brings us to 93 days. That concludes our presentation on the budget. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Christie. I'm sure there are lots of questions. Okay. Would anyone like to go first with questions from this lengthy presentation from?
This was a great presentation. Thank you, committee. Thank you, staff. Thank you.
The amount of work put into that.
Thank you all.
Well,
You're
like I
shocked
said,
by that, all right?
No. Like I said, it took a lot of, it was a very large team that was able to put all of this information together. So, and of course, with Dr. Gutierrez's leadership and his guidance.
Well, I've always said that a hope is not a plan, but in this case, there's hope, which can become a plan, which is really positive.
Yes, sir.
Good work, good work.
Thank you.
So, someone want to go? So in the TASB staffing, one of the things that they hit us hard with is being overstaffed compared to the state with our police department. Is that going to be something that's going to be coming forward in another workshop or not, or is that something that?
The police department, actually, we're not overstaffed there.
Well, compared to the state, we are not compared to local, according to the TASB.
According to TASB, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if that's something that's going to be coming. I'm guessing not. I'll go to the next thing. On the compensation plan changes, the fine arts program, the mariachi director, we're increasing not only days, but we're increasing the yearly stipend. I would feel more comfortable if you're going to keep the days at 15 like all the other directors, if you're going to increase the stipend, or don't increase the stipend and increase the amount of days. Every other director is at the same, is at 15 days with a certain stipend. I don't see why one director should get an extra 5 days. I mean, they all work very, very hard. That's something that did you want to address that, Ms. Loya?
Yeah. Ms. Loya brought us this recommendation.
Well, I see that, but I don't like we don't make job descriptions for people. We make it for the job.
Yes.
And yes, we have some outstanding people that are knocking it out of the ballpark. However, the job is the job.
Exactly.
And we're in a crunch right now. So that one to me was an outlier. I mean,
not all of my stipends are at the same. For instance, my choir directors are lower. My orchestra directors are lower. But because mariachi has so many out-of-town events and so many different performances that they do for the city and for our district, I did make a consideration for the amount of days and the extra work that they are putting in. And that was my reasoning behind that.
So I thought that might be it, because it's true, when the city calls us, they ask for our cheerleaders, they ask for our dance team, and they ask for mariachi, and we go to everything. And so I do get that, but then I didn't see that for the dance directors or the cheer directors. I didn't see those additional days for them. And also, mariachi goes to a ton of competitions, but they're not UIL competitions. They're sort of things that you seek out yourself. And I think they're fantastic, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing that. But we need to be fair and consistent across the board. So that's where I have, so just something to think about.
Yes, ma'am.
Nothing. And then my second thing, thank you, Ms. Loy.
That's it for me.
Yeah. My second thing, because I had a question, was, and I didn't catch it last year, but the reading fund, the stipend for the 10 extra days at Gonzales Elementary only. I don't have a problem with that since it's not Title I. However, I do have a problem with the amount, because if you multiply that times the daily rate of a teacher, if you're going to give them 10 days at the daily rate, the max at that would only be $3,550. You're doing a max, a 20-year teacher at $3,600, 30-year teacher at $4,000. To me, we just be consistent. Something to think about. We just stay within the daily rate, because it's consistent, it's fair, it's a rubric, that was my issue there. The other issue I have is with athletics. I don't like the cap of $300. To me, your daily rate is your daily rate. If you make more than $300, you should be paid that. And so I don't think that should be capped at a daily rate. I just think that we need to be fair and consistent with people, and not pay people, the job is the job, like I said earlier, and we've always been trying really hard to be consistent with that. And maybe we can reward people in other ways. I know that I had lots of questions about the librarians. Well, I also had issue with the field trips. And I'm going to let Trustee Kittleman discuss librarians, because that's her expertise, and she's going to do a much better job at that, I'm sure, asking questions. But for me, people are self-selecting themselves out of our school district, and those are the type of people that are looking at what other schools offer, academic-wise, fine arts-wise, athletics-wise. There's a reason why they're leaving our school district. And so when we have all these extra things, like, when I grew up, we had driver's ed classes at school, and we taught every third grader how to swim. To me, one of the most important things is the field trips. We have local, other school districts that they will take their entire, freshman or sophomore class to colleges for field trips and things like that, and that's very incentivizing. They'll take them to the symphony, they'll take them to the Nutcracker, they'll take them to different things. I think that that's incentivizing to parents, and it's also academically a wonderful thing for students. When we live in a city that's economically, when most of our schools are Title I schools, and most of our students will never step foot in a performing arts center. They'll never listen to an orchestra. They'll never listen to a symphony. They'll never see a ballet like the Nutcracker. They'll never go to Quintet Mazatlan and experience that. They'll never go to a museum that's a Smithsonian museum. I just think that cutting that saving, $50,000, to me, it's not worth it, because what the students get out of that is just, honestly, it's life-changing for students. And like I said, a lot of kids may never leave McAllen, and this is an opportunity for them to go see these things. And it's an opportunity for them to, those soft skill sets of getting dressed up and learning how to sit when you're in an auditorium and learning when to clap and when to pause. And it's all those things that you learn that I think is the soft skill sets that are wonderful as well. So I hope y'all reconsider that, and I hope we stay with field trips. I'd like to see more field trips. I'd like to see us going to universities and going to, going to Fireman's Park and looking for stuff in the water and doing all sorts of incredible things. So I will yield the floor. I know there's a bunch of questions about librarians.
May I just clarify?
Oh, please.
On the police officers? The reason why I said that we're not overstaffed is because one of the things that they mentioned to us is it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison,
right?
Because we're the only ones. We have a police department, and the comparison that was taken did not include the contracted school resource officer. So some schools had a 0 on there, even though they actually did have police officers, but it was through a contracted service.
Their city.
So they don't have that data to actually give us an accurate. So, even based off of that, she said that police is not an area that we wanted to cut.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's all my questions for now.
Well, I think we all probably have a lot of comments. Should we decide on a good system to talk through them?
Go for it.
Or
One at a time?
Yeah.
should we go through
I think we should
each
go.
of them, like the descriptions, and if anyone wrote a comment?
Take it.
Do it.
Well, I think what we were expecting is that after the presentation, write down your questions or highlight your areas that you have questions so that we could go over those. And then we'll go to the next board member and so on.
So I'll just begin with the libraries. I have issue with the reduction of libraries. And I just got an information request, so I'm a little bit late to the party on looking at the information. So I didn't get to study it that much. But everybody knows that reading in elementary school is essential. Everybody understands. Oh, thank you. Our director of library knows we're going to be asking questions. The schools that have the most AR points, the most licenses, they're in their library the most. Those are the students, those are the schools that are most successful in our state assessments. And so I think that the library is like what they were saying earlier. Somebody, Ms. Frey was saying that it is the den of the school, and it really is. I had children a long time ago attend Gonzales Elementary, where that principal had the expectation that they would go, I felt like daily, to the library. Those kids read so much, and their test scores showed it, but also their love of reading. As adults now, they're still deep readers because they learned that love of reading in elementary school, and they're actually incredible at math, I think, because of the reading. Then I had students that went to a different elementary school where it was not important to the principal, and they didn't focus on reading and being in the library all the time. And I can tell academically, and I can tell in their math scores, and I can just tell in their imagination and create, as a parent, I see the value in the library and it being the center hub, especially for elementary schools. So when I saw that you were reducing that, especially in the schools that are under enrollment are the schools they're the South Side schools, and then some of them have the worst scores. But you'll look like Houston Elementary, the Blue Star School, that when Miss Loya was here, those kids were in the library all the time, and reading is the reason that school was a Blue Star school, because they were in that library, and the expectation from that principal was that they would be reading so much. And I was asking Trustee Kittleman, her, because this is her expertise, so I don't know if you want to jump in or...
No, I think well, my first question is just to clarify, what's the current suggestion with the librarians? Like, what does it mean to absorb some of those positions? What will the schools look like? How will that impact our elementary schools or high schools? What does that look like?
Well, first of all, currently we had a vacancy at the high school. So absorbing meant not to fill that position. So that was one of the recommendations, that the high schools lose one librarian. Okay. We had a vacancy at an elementary school, So the recommendation was to move one of the high school librarians to that vacancy.
And there were a lot of principals on this committee. What was the feedback from principals about this decision?
On the librarians, we actually got a mix, you know. I think the greatest concern came from the Director of Library Services and Instructional Technology. That she shared some concerns, which is similar to what Ms. Aliceda is talking about.
Right. Ms. Vega, if you don't mind, will you kind of share some of your concerns?
Sure.
Or ideas?
So this was definitely a red flag when this presentation came out. And so I told Dr. De Hoyos, like, where did they get this information? So when we looked at it, you know, when it says you're going to replace a certified librarian with an aide, that right there is a red flag, because you can see that a librarian, all of our librarians, if you look at the data that you asked for, they see at least 18 to 35 classes a week, which means they see every student in their school and expose them to reading, expose them to questioning. They go over, I put a curriculum map in there, they go over digital learning skills, they go over the support our ELAR, TEACs, right? So that's their job. They are reading specialists, right? So they work with kids every single day to do everything that they can to instill the love of reading and to foster their reading skills, right? So you're talking about every single one of those. And I know the one red flag I see is if you're looking at that 400, right, is Sam Houston Elementary. Right now, they have 370 students, yet she has checked out more books than any library here in McAllen ISD, and her kids have read more. They have more, an average, more AR points than any other campus, including Gonzales, all year. So why, I don't understand why you would take that away from those students. Because an aide, if you look at Escandon, they have, what's it? Escandon has not had a librarian for a year and a half. They had a sub. And look at their books. 1,200 books checked out, whereas Sam Houston has 20,504. You look at what is their average reading? When you look at their AR points, they have 5.9, and then you look at Sam Houston with 46. So, and then you look at, what was the other campus? So Wilson has not had a librarian for about 4 months, and they had a sub in there as well. And you can see they average 7, and then they've checked out 2,004 books. So if you have someone that's a skilled librarian, they manage. And you can see that that's not all they do.
Right. Can you talk about what librarians do beyond just a typical seeing classes for a standard lesson?
Sure. So they're in charge of all the literacy nights. All of our elementary librarians, I've got Fields over here. She does all the social media for Fields. She takes care of the campus website with some other people. She was not only last year, well, she was 21, 22. She's right there.
The district, not just the campus, the district.
Say that again?
Wasn't she, sorry to interrupt.
In 21, 22, she was the Teacher of the Year and the District Teacher of the Year. And she's the Technology Teacher of the Year this year, and she's an ambassador for like Adobe, and she was just in San Antonio. So that's the kind of person that you're talking about, because all of our librarians, whether they're elementary, middle school, or high school, are extremely skilled. And if you take that into consideration and take that off of campus, you're also looking at all the tech stuff that they do, right? So from distributing teacher technology, student devices, replacing those devices on a daily basis. They're in charge of textbooks. I mean, not on one high school, but they're in charge of troubleshooting every day, the Promethean boards, technology updates, disposals. That's just the technology part. They're also doing that in the library part and the whole campus. So they have a very diverse role that one pair is not going to have the kind of skill set that a librarian does, a certified librarian.
And thank you for pulling that data that you just worked on yesterday whenever I emailed you.
Okay.
But
Appreciate it.
I hope that our board makes data-driven decisions about who we're thinking about absorbing and whatnot. And I would never want to compromise our instructional core, right? That's our number one responsibility in this district. And so I know Natalie forwarded Ann's, when she answered my requests, but beyond that, there are many, many links of research, quantitative studies showing certified librarians and their connection and correlation to high-stakes testing, right? And improving scores. And, you know, we're doing well. Our rating is, you know, at a B right now. I think there were some changes in the scale and whatnot, but we want to maintain our high academic standing right now. And our librarians are a large part in that. So I know this is an initial meeting, but it's also like, let's think critically about what we're deciding to do and how it will impact students. I would not support removing or consolidating or absorbing librarians, but does anyone else have any thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts on a lot of things, but this is only our first meeting. We have many more to go. If you're
Yes.
In the broad terms, one of the things I'm concerned about is looking at the 8 to 6.5 ratio, and it's indicating that about a $3 million savings if we move. Well, is that the thought? Is that, I mean, it should, in her presentation, she gave us different scenarios, even a 7.6. Where's the administration kind of looking at that? And is it going to be 3.5, I mean, 3 million approximate, or could it be more? Yes. And how would it impact our staff and how to work in that type of environment when they're used to a one planning period and one conference period? Yeah. What's your thought on that? Those are big areas of discussion we got to have.
TASP just gave us a report about 2 weeks ago. So we have all options on the table. What we presented to you is everything that's on the table for consideration. And yes, it's the initial budget workshop. It's a second one, but we have quite a bit of other meetings to go by. Obviously, the $14 million deficit, it stands out. It could be more. That's just from the funding formula. Yeah. It could be more because at the next budget workshop, we're going to talk about the collegiate campus that we need to staff it, and we need to talk about the pre-K4 that we need to also get staff. And so we are looking at everything, and what we presented to you was everything. And then from there, we work, you know, what we can afford to keep and what we cannot afford to keep. And keep in mind that we haven't even touched base on salary increases. And that also takes a chunk out of the budget. And we're not even talking about that. Right now, we're trying to reduce it as much as possible so that perhaps we can give better wages to our staff next year. And that's, you know, if we're looking at increases, you're looking at it adding another $3 million cost, reoccurring cost. So that's why this gives you the whole picture of everything that we're looking at. We'll continue working with that as we move on. There's a lot of needs, there's a lot of wants, and we just have to iron it out and see how we can compromise by June. But we have 3 priorities as a leadership team. Number 1, save the human capital. We don't want to lay off any employees. Right. And that's
a big one.
That's a big one.
Yes, it is.
And sacrifices are going to have to be made to save the human capital. Yeah. I don't want to be like a district that you saw the article that is laying off 304 employees.
And you've never done it before.
Never.
You've never laid people off.
And my number 1 priority is save the human capital that we have. My number 2 priority is sustain the instructional programs that our kids have. Don't cut on that. And the number 3 is better wages. And if you saw in our plan, you saw that in our stipends, yeah, we might be in a deficit, but I'm trying to give those stipends a little bit better, make them a little bit better so that we can continue staying competitive, take good care of our staff that is going to be here, and get those stipends a little bit better. We're not even close to where we need to be, but at least we're making some gains. So I have to balance everything out. But at the end of the day, save human capital, sustain the instructional programs that our kids have, and provide better wages. And if we can do that by the end of by June, I think we're going to be fine. But along the way, we're going to have to make some tough calls. Everybody wants their department, their campus, and their staff. But at some point, we're going to have to make some tough calls in the name of saving jobs for everyone who's still employed with us.
Normally, at this, this would normally be, and you've been with us before, it would have been 3 workshops to cover all of this information. And we've only just gotten it today and had a chance to start reviewing it. We did get the screenings, obviously, on Friday, and we started looking on the weekend. But there's still a lot to digest, and I think we need to systematically be very cognizant of that. I'm not one at this stage of the game to start picking and choosing, although I've gotten a lot of input, just like we all have, about picking and choosing. We got to look at this holistically. For whatever position we save, we're probably going to lose something else, and is it going to outweigh or not? And so I think it's important to listen, learn, and give you some thoughts. I'm not going to use the term. I used it in my campaign long time ago. It slipped out at one point and just kind of became the slogan, so I'm not going to use it. But the point is, everything should be on the table. Everything. And that's what I'm accustomed to in the business world. 13 reorgs, everything was on the table. It didn't matter what it was. And some of us made it through, and a lot of us didn't. And it's just the way it was. But I also want to talk about the attrition rate. Now, I hear the attrition rate. We're going to resolve this on attrition rate. Have you determined what the attrition rate is by the various aspects of the organization that you're looking to get to where you reach parity? What does that look like?
Attrition rate, and you're referring to the teacher retention?
Well, it was used in different times in the conversation by TASB, and we've used it by attrition, yes. By attrition. And you said, well, we're going to. And early on, you were very good to show us we had these 2 openings, but we had these other folks who were even. That's good. Yes. But there are other areas where we're not there, I'm presuming.
No.
So that's what I'm asking. What's the rate normally for the organization? And most organizations broken up by job class. So like teachers would be one, FMNO would be another, central office procurement would be another, so that you can see where you need. Because when you say I need to cut 300 positions, I'm just using it as a figure, by the way. It has to be targeted as to where you need. Am I correct? You just can't say 300 of anybody. It has to be targeted.
And it's based on those different categories that she went over. However, like she mentioned in her presentation, it's going to have to be a multi-year approach because attrition doesn't happen at once. So it's as people are retiring or getting promoted and there's a vacancy.
Or
and
leaving.
Then identifying that vacancy, whether we want to continue to fill that vacancy or eliminate it. Is it one of the areas that we're looking at eliminating through attrition? Or if there's a vacancy and there's a group, like for example, in the teacher aides, instructional aides, we have to, one of the recommendations is that we eliminate 113. So if there's a vacancy for one type of instructional aid, maybe let's say kinder, pre-kinder, which is required for the ratio, the class size ratio. Is there an aid, instructional aid of another type that can be reassigned into that vacancy and then closing that second position through attrition? So that's how attrition would occur. Do we have a rate right now? No, we don't. Like I said, because it's all going to be dependent on future resignations, retirements.
Well, what I'm referring to, if I may, what I'm referring to is in the recent past. Every organization knows what their normal attrition rate is. You're at either 3% or an 8%, and then when you project forward, like you said, moving forward, then you kind of know where you ought to be, and hopefully that's closing at a target that you'd like. Ideally, you want it sooner than later. So I appreciate everything you said, because that answered a lot of other questions I had, so that helped me. So and this is key, I think, is that you're going to take a systematic, targeted approach by position, whether to replace or not. And I gather your management is going to have to justify how it's going to be replaced and find another employee to replace that if you need that role. within the organization. Is that what I'm getting?
Yes, and I understand, and we can certainly go back and calculate based on our historical data. We have access to the teacher attrition rate. It's anywhere between 9 and 10% around the Region 1 area. I don't know exactly what it is for McAllen ISD, but I can certainly look that up and get back to you.
Just, again, it doesn't have to be email or anything. When you do your next presentation, we can
Yes,
circle
sir.
back around. And just to get a kind of a guide or understanding, because the term's been used consistently, we're going to resolve a lot of this to an attrition. What is it normally? And usually when things are rough and bad, it slows down. I mean, folks want to just stay put. So now we have to pivot and figure out how we're going to encourage folks that may look at other opportunities within the organization. Now, these ESSER positions, how are we going to be handling those folks in filling these positions? Are there going to be a first opportunity? I mean, they obviously had a skill set that we were very interested in, and that's why we moved them into those roles. We're going to try to retain folks, or they have to, just like everybody else, apply, and if they qualify, they get.
That's correct.
Okay.
They would need to apply for vacancies, and there are some in high areas of need that we do have some vacancies that could be reassigned into those positions, and plans for that are already underway. However, there are some that will not have a job at the end of the year. And of course, everybody in those positions, I'm told, has already had conversations with.
Well, they were notified when they were hired on an ESSER position that it was.
That it was grant funded.
Grant funded.
Not to mention, almost every meeting for the last year we've been talking about.
We like to keep all the staff, and we want to. The TASB has given us, and they said, and she said it, Ms. Karen Dooley, their recommendations. They're not saying for us to do it, but we have to look at those recommendations carefully. The easiest thing for us to do is to say, okay, we are over 113 instructional aides. We're just not going to hire. I mean, we're just going to tell them and let them go. But that's not what we're doing, and that's what we're not about. That we're about saving human capital, and we'd rather go through attrition, and it may take us 2 or 3 years to get there, but we're going to save jobs, and we're not going to lay off anyone, and that's part of the growing pains that we're going to go through, because then some people are going to want something else, and we can't say yes to everybody. Otherwise, we'll never get where we need to be.
Exactly.
And we have to look at everything, look at everybody, but the number one thing is just through close positions, through attrition, and move the staff from within so that we can continue operating with the human capital that we have, and keep them. And it's difficult times out there. We don't want to. We just want to keep all our employees employed that want to be with McAllen ISD.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I wanted to touch on something.
Go ahead.
Trustee Saldivar started talking about schedules, right? And I'm just kind of thinking, if we do need to rethink some scheduling, I'd also like to recommend that we look up, or that we look into the total instructional time that our staff is working, because I believe, I don't know the minimum number of instructional time off the top of my head, but I did the math, and I think you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but all schools would end at 2:45, and somewhere along the road in the past 10 years, we've increased until what time do our high schools get out?
4:15.
4:15. With no pay increase, I mean, very little increase for that amount of working time. And so if we do have to adjust some planning periods or whatnot, we really need to take a look at what we are asking them to continue to stay at school. And I'm not sure there is data to support academic growth for the rest of the 45 minutes, but that could give teachers an opportunity from 3 to 4 that they don't have right now to meet with their teams and plan. And it would be good for morale, among other things, but I'd like to just add that to the conversation too.
Yeah, I like that idea, but what does their contract call for as far as what a workday is?
I think as long as they meet the, well,
Minimum
they have to meet
instructional time.
the beginning and ending time, but what Ms. Kittleman is talking about is the instructional time.
For
There's
students.
certain minutes that the kids have to have by the end of the year that we must meet those instructional minutes. I believe it's 76,300 something. It's 76,000 plus, I remember that. And so we have to meet those instructional minutes. Now, anything above and beyond is not required, but we require to meet that minimum amount of minutes per year. And that's what she's talking about.
Okay,
So
I
we'll look into
misunderstood. I
that.
thought we were looking at a workday for a teacher as to what that would look like.
How many minutes, anybody
Well,
knows?
they technically have to be-
76,000, if I recall.
I personally, while you're looking at that data, I love that idea only because if we could start school even earlier and finish earlier, then you can start to do the dance classes, the piano classes, the all the extracurricular activities you can start earlier in the day, because as it is right now, you get out at 4:15. Well, you can't go to something until 5. But if you got out earlier, you could do a lot more after school. You could, take
Yeah,
different
and-
lessons and stuff. But I also like starting school later, like at 9 in the morning, so that you could do all your athletics and all your fine arts from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. All instead of staying after school every day, you
There's
could
a lot
go
of working
early every morning.
parents.
Well,
But so you still end up being there the whole time, but you knock it out earlier. But anyway, that's something to think about.
Yeah, I'm
We'll
sorry,
look into the instructional minutes.
Yeah, as to Trustee Kittleman's, I think her point was to look into
have my
it.
computer,
And
otherwise I would
that's
Google it.
a really good conveyance of thought.
76,000.
That we may have
Yeah, start school at
to look
9.
at that.
How many?
75,600.
75,600 minutes required under House Bill 261.
75, okay.
That's for elementary, middle, and high
each-
school.
Yeah, and each day is 420.
Yeah,
But you could go to the dentist
those are
without missing
instructional
school. You could.
Well, that's true.
I mean, a
you
lot
can
of our
schedule all
teachers
your
are tutoring
appointments.
too, so they don't even get any time for a break in between going to their next thing. So it would really do well, I think.
We would put that into account, yes. We're, like I said, we presented everything, and then from there, we can work it as we move forward.
In the area of software, and I'm glad to see that, the thing that's to me concerning is, did it take a crisis, or for lack of a better word, or a financial dilemma to start looking at this sort
Yes.
of thing? And so the sad thing is, and we've talked about this for many a year, about a continuous renewal process. So I would think going forward that a continuous renewal process be put in place as things start to subside and the state does whatever and we become lull again. I really think that's important. Our organization had a continuous renewal process, and it addressed a lot of things before it ever became problematic. It's better to make adjustments than to be in a crisis mode. So it's just a thought. But in the area of software, from what I've understood in the past, we buy a software for X department and then another one, and they don't talk to each other. Now, part of it may be just the way the state sets things up, I don't know. But are you looking at trying to connect the software that interacts with each other in a much more effective way?
That's correct. That's what Dr. De Hoyos has that committee that everyone that is involved with buying licenses or renewing licenses is involved in this committee too, so that we don't duplicate services with software, and that's why we are able to save perhaps $1.5 million of software that we don't need to spend for next year.
And everyone in that committee are in our audience right now.
Good.
So if there's any questions for any particular department, we can also ask.
Okay, excellent.
detail.
That's good to see that.
Yes.
Appreciate your report today. I have another other thing that I want to get into. This is a lot of information, but it's something that's been consistently troubling for us for the last few years, and that's in the area of substitute teachers. Now, I know you may be looking at HR restructuring where somebody in HR now is really monitoring substitute teachers, as my understanding. I could be wrong. But I noticed in the chart it says full-day substitute teachers degreed and certified, and we're at 135. And I see movement in the other areas, which is good, and in the others that Trustee Aliceda, our board president, brought up as well, and I concurred with some of her thoughts. I think we're better off leaving the days and that sort of thing, as she stated. But I think it's something you really need to be thinking about that, because staff does need to take time off. They're allowed certain days. Many are hesitant to for a number of reasons. And there's a whole lot of things going on with family members, et cetera. And so I just think 135 is awfully low to attract and retain folks. But I'm not going to tell you what to do on that. But I'm just asked to please look at that and see if you're moving and making some adjustments based on a lot of this conversations and many more that you're all going to have, is we really got to make sure we have a consistent process or approach that when a teacher's out of that classroom, that whoever's there can continue to provide instruction. And we've all heard the stories where sometimes you do get a teacher that's licensed and certified, and she walks right in, looks at the curriculum, and keeps teaching. But other times, we're putting somebody that's not. And so to the parents, they're expecting to drop off that child that they're going to get 75,000 X amount of minutes, and teachers out for 2-3 days, and they're getting no minutes. So I think if we're going to attract this academic issue and the like, pretty much any time that a child is in a classroom, there's a qualified individual, they're licensed and certified. That should be our target that is providing instruction, whether they be a substitute or they be our teachers. That's all I got from my end of it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
If you're on the same topic as mine, it's going to be slightly different.
If you go, I have more things, but you go.
Yeah, I have a lot of things, but one, I want to thank the staff. Huge applause for the staff, because not only do you have to compile all this for us, but all the different departments have to come together and help you decide what they want to cut, what they can cut, and how they can help us manage this budget, right? So thank you for that. I'm seeing reductions in software. We're looking at positions that maybe we don't fill. We're looking at attrition. I see reductions in central office staffing, reductions in child and custodial and child nutrition, all of this stuff. I'm not seeing athletics anywhere here. And so we spent a huge amount of our ESSER money on improving. I'm sorry, Brian, not picking on y'all, but this doesn't look comprehensive to me when I look at it. I look at teachers and aides and interventionists and all kinds of stuff, but I'm not looking at all that goes on the athletic sides. My way of thinking is always academics before athletics. And I completely support athletics. I'm the earliest one to get to the football games and to everything else, but we have to be fair here, right? And if we're talking about, thanks, Brian, but if we're talking about being fair across the board, let's look at all of those things too. And I'm not sure and maybe I'm tired. And we've been looking at data for a long time, and data-driven, yes, we are, Lizzie. That's always, and I appreciate all the data. But we need to be fair and look across the board. And I know you probably made some recommendations, and maybe we're just not seeing them here.
Well, we have 654 more kids in middle school athletics as compared to 18-19 pre-pandemic. That would be our 5th biggest middle school. The probability of probably 95 to 98% of them are going to go to high school athletics. So that's going to affect those numbers. So 654 more kids. We have 133 coaches that are core teachers plus special education. So there's all kinds of athletic positions or athletic stipends, but we have another 2,450 kids that are in the Elevate program that are in 5th and 6th grade that are going to become 7th and 8th graders. So we're building up our athletic program. If I put my practitioner hat on as a former principal, you have as many kids as possible in extracurricular activity. That includes fine arts, that includes robotics, that includes chess, that includes athletics. The probability of them coming to school, doing better on test scores and so forth, goes up when they're part of something bigger themselves and when they're part of a team. So 654 more kids are in athletics right now. Our coaches do an outstanding job of goal setting around academics, attendance, grades, star scores, service, and so forth. They do an outstanding job. They are the backbone of a lot of our campuses. A lot of kids are in athletics that maybe would not be in other programs because they work with the highly at-risk kids, 100%. So when I was an athletic coordinator, the principal would come to me and say, hey, I need you to get this kid in athletics. That's why our numbers have gone up. We've taken that philosophy and with our 6th graders and so forth, because it doesn't matter how you did in 6th grade. It doesn't matter if you were a troublemaker in 6th grade. You want to change a kid's life, you get them in athletics or other extracurricular activities.
I love your passion. I love that answer. I think you're correct in every single one of those. You know, I'm not discounting the role that athletics plays in keeping our students here and keeping them engaged and keeping them on a structured path. A lot of times I know that the coaches are their second father, second mother, or whatever the case may be. And they're the ones that sometimes it's the only person that's going to give them that structure. I realize that. But I'm not seeing anything in here.
Well, over the last 3 years in the athletic budget, as far as human capital, we probably saved the district about $275,000.
So that should be reflected here.
Well, that was over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Me and the assistant athletic director are doing the work of 4 people.
And I appreciate that.
So
and
that's a
great.
lot of money, plus a clerk, plus 2 grounds guys that usually would work for athletics. So it's approximately $275,000.
That's great. And that should be reflected here somewhere because that's important, right? It's important for us to see everything across the board.
Right.
Because when I'm seeing reductions in custodial and child nutrition, which is just as important as sports, you know,
Right.
our kids come here and they get their meals, breakfast, lunch, and sometimes even a snack, or through the Elevate programs or whatever, they stay late.
Right.
But we need to see everybody across the board because that concerns me.
Well, here's another thing. From 15-16 till today, coaches have not been paid their daily rate. So there's been cuts for the last 9 years with our coaches. So they did not get paid. They were capped at $270. You go from the low point daily rate is about $283. The high point daily rate is about $346. So if you look at that, they've been cut for the last 9 years as compared to anybody else in this district that gets the daily rate.
And I'm not suggesting that anybody be cut. I am part of this group, this team of 8 right here, that is looking at every possible way to save human capital. It is not my intent at all. And for anybody watching and listening, that is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that we need to make sure that we are able to offer all of the educational components that we need and all of the athletic or extracurricular, UIL, theater, whatever you want.
Right.
But we need to see it all reflected on here. Fair is fair across the board. And don't mean to give you extra work at all, because I think you've given us an extreme amount of information. I'm just asking that we see everything across the board. I'm not saying anybody should go. None of us here are saying that. So please don't take that as what I'm saying. And I like that you have your numbers and you can defend yourself in your program. Absolutely, that's awesome. I'm just saying I want to see it here because all of this is scary. It's scary for us, and it's scary for everybody that works for this district. And we want to make sure that we're addressing everything.
Well, if you look at the daily rate that's being proposed right now, is going to be an extra of approximately $50-something thousand. If we went at the midpoint on the daily rate average, it's about $87,000. That was probably $87,000 over the last 9 years that was not paid to the coaches. So you can look at that also as a savings. Because in 15-16, for some reason, they were capped at $270, whereas everybody else in this district was paid by their daily rate. So that is a lot of money. Over a 9 to 10 year period, that's probably $800-something thousand that coaches did not get in McAllen ISD.
So I don't want all the coaches to be mad at me at all. I'm just saying.
No, I am
let's move on.
because they do work hard.
I think Mr. McClenny has given a good explanation. And those were good questions because I was not aware, like, for example, that the coaches were getting $270 daily rate until he brought it to my attention. So those are good questions, Ms. Peña, because everyone needs to know that athletics has been lacking, and we're moving it up. We're moving them up to where they need to be. We're still not there yet, but we're making gains. By the way, I want to add to this because I did have a coach talk to me about the meals, so we need to make sure we included it. The kids get, I think, $8.
$8 a meal, and that's not enough at this point because of inflation.
A combo.
You can't get a combo at Chick-fil-A for under $8.
So you need to, we need to make sure that we put like
We're proposing $10.
$10. Okay, we're gonna put it in there, and it came because of the questions you're asking. Now I just reminded myself, because I told this coach a couple of days ago, I look into it, he says, they go to Whataburger, we take them to Whataburger, we only give them $8. The Whataburger meal is like 9 something.
Right.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what, we're going to look into it and put $10 so they can buy a combo. So we're going to do that because McAllen ISD is better than that.
That's
and our
right.
kids go out there and represent us. They are role models, and so they deserve.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of move us on, I think what Trustee Peña was saying, that in the TASB report, though, it did reflect athletics, and in the report given by MISD, you're not touching athletics. So that's, I think, what she's referring to is that.
It's because the recommendation is based on changes to the master schedule, and those changes really can't be made right now. That's something that we would look for planning for staffing for next year.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine, and I appreciate that, Brian. Thank you so much for that. You know,
Yes.
your passion is clear, but for my sake and for everybody watching, because not everybody has a copy of the report
Yeah.
and may not even know to request it or whatever. They may not be engaged at that level,
Yeah.
but these are things that the community needs to know if we're being fair across the board.
Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
If I do a quick follow-up, is it possible, or you want to wait until somebody else has spoken? I'm good with that.
Are you
if
done?
want.
Trustee Regalado.
Thank you.
So first, I'd like to echo my colleagues' sentiments because this is exactly the type of information that I was wanting to see since our last budget cycle. So I greatly appreciate all the work that you all have put into it. It's very clear to me that everybody on the executive leadership team and throughout the district appreciates the situation that we're in and is serious and committed about making the changes that need to be made. So thank you. And just one comment about, I don't know if this predated you, Dr. Gutierrez, but at some point we talked about if attrition doesn't work, or maybe in conjunction with attrition, do we have a system of potential incentive program or some kind of tiered program? I know that we at some point discussed something along those lines,
Yes,
so
we
I'm
did.
curious if the administration is thinking about that and what that might look like if we do.
Like a resignation, retirement incentive?
Like a voluntary
Yeah.
severance type of thing.
I have, my experience over having that over the years is that it pretty much doesn't benefit us at all. It just, the staff that's going to retire or resign, they're going to do it for the most part, and all we're doing is just adding an extra expense. At least that's been my experience over the years, that I see that that if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, and if we do that incentive, it's just going to add an expense that, in all probabilities, and more than likely, that staff member was going to resign or retire anyways. At least that's been my experience as we looked at this over and over the years. You know, I've seen that it doesn't benefit us other than add an extra expense.
Okay, I was just contemplating, you know, in the event that, like we've talked about, attrition takes a long time, and our situation is a little more, I think, requires expeditiousness. So I was just curious your thoughts.
I will tell you, Dr. Gutierrez, that when we did do this, it was about $385,000. When we put a cap on it, and we saved about $3 million a year. But the reason we did it was, as you know, of course it's changed now. We wanted to know, like, as early as possible, like in April, how many folks were wanting to go, and then we targeted. For example, I recall, because a good friend of mine was a speech pathologist. Well, it turned out you were one over, so that was one. And she was thinking about retiring in 2 years, but because of that incentive, which was about $3,000, she took it. She had the numbers and everything lined up, but now the incentive was, well, I get an extra $3,000, you know? And so that's where it helped us to get the numbers we needed to get. And so it did move things along within the organization for us so that we could meet the number. But at that point, it was going to look like we were going to have to lay folks off. And your focus is not to do that. So I can see why in this case it may not be worth, because you're trying not to do that. In that case, that scenario, we had to cut down a certain number, but they had to be very specific in the departments.
I had something also on the on page 22. It talked about reduced department and campus budgets by 8%. I'm always fearful of doing things like that unilateral, because different campuses have so many different, like you have an elementary school that has a PTO that raises tons and tons and tons of money. So if the department, if you say you have to cut by 8%, it's not going to impact them because they have other resources. But 8% to another school who has no PTOs, but they have lots of clubs and lots of participation and all that stuff, it's going to impact them so much more. And so I hate to see things that are just unilaterally. Everybody gets 8% because not everybody is the same. Not every campus is the same. Not every culture is the same, and not everybody has the same needs. You have very different needs on different campuses, and the same thing with different departments. 8% across the board to different departments. Some departments are very lean. They've just built that way. They run that way, and they're very lean. And so 8% is like 80% to them versus other departments that might be overstaffed and they could take maybe 20% of the hit versus a department that's very lean. So I really hope that you look at that and do it based on the campus needs. Because, like I said, you could have a campus that has 30 different clubs and that is doing all these incredible things. And to reduce their budget by 8% would impact that versus another campus that they only have one club. 8% is not going to hurt them. So I hope that there's a rubric that you're looking at when you're talking about campuses, because like everybody up here is saying, we don't want to do anything to hurt the student, that core of academics. That's our business. And so I really hope that it's not just an arbitrary, everybody 8%, find your person. I hope you dive deeper into it and you look, again, like we talked about last time, is how many students will it impact? How many students participate? We dig a little bit deeper. During public comment, somebody said something about that we closed today a computer lab, and I don't know if that's true or not, but I remember during COVID, the Department of Technology, they were working, from their homes, fixing everybody's computers. They were remotely, is the word. They were working remotely, and I don't know, there was 20 Department of Technology people working remotely. And so maybe there is rationale. I know that they're now housed over at behind Row. Maybe if you put them, since what they do is remotely, you put them on the campuses, the elementary campuses, now you have a computer aid kind of technology person to help the librarian out now, so the librarian doesn't have to do the technology aspect anymore. Now you have a certified person with a master's in the Department of Technology, because they do work remotely. They can access your computer anywhere, right?
No, you're right.
And so maybe that's a way, unless the computer labs are antiquated and people don't use, I'm sad to say I don't really know what happens in a computer lab, but I'm sure it's important to the academics part. So that's just a thought of, since they do work remotely, maybe put them on the campuses and help the librarians out and give them a little relief on the technology side. Right?
Yeah. We thought we had it all.
Always, right?
We got a lot of homework.
Well, and that's what's and I think it's so important, like everybody's been saying here and the administration's been saying, is these are just suggestions. This is in no way, we're going to go and cut in the schools that you mentioned, they're below 400 people, so that librarian's going, that librarian's going, that librarian. These are just things that you're thinking of, that they're, I remember last year I said we were going to outsource one department, and the next day, and so I learned my lesson, so I hope everybody understands that these are just, it's constantly evolving and constantly, it's work in progress, and none of this is going to happen until June, and when we actually gavel in the last day of June and we vote on it. So these things could change drastically, and so I just hope that everybody, there's not panic. I hope there's no panic, or we're all in it together. We're all here to help, and we all want to do what's best for our children. Everything we do, every vote we do, and not just this, everything that we do is always for the benefit of the children. And so I hope people realize that. Yep. Trustee Kittleman.
Can I ask a few questions? Again, this is preliminary, but the kinder through second early literacy interventionist positions, I'm noticing 17 positions.
I was going to ask that too.
Yeah, can we talk about that? Right. So how many students currently, if you don't know, that's totally fine. We can just write them down and we can revisit. And I meant to email this before so you could be prepared. Sorry. I was looking at things up until this moment. But do you know off the top of your head how many students currently do our kinder through second early literacy interventionists see?
I don't have an actual number right now, but what they do is that these were teachers, they're classroom teachers.
Right.
But they don't have a roster. They're interventionists, so they work with small group, and they're funded out of State Comp Ed, which is our 193 fund.
Right.
And the purpose of State Comp Ed is the district gets funding from the state, and they're required to give state and federal programs 55% of that. And with that, we are to ensure that we are working with our students who are at risk or economically disadvantaged.
Right.
And so the purpose of these positions is to work with small groups of students who are at risk. And these positions had been created before I came in because there was a different instructional program that was being used. And so there was an early literacy interventionist and then a leveled literacy interventionist. So there was one that was a K to 2 and then a 3 to 5. So there were 2 at each campus. Part of the decision for this is that the funding, the staffing, over the years, I believe State Comp Ed has absorbed a lot of positions. And so now my grant, I've exceeded my salaries, and I cannot
sustain.
I can't sustain. And so with the 2 years ago, I think there was a $1,700 across the board increase that everyone received. And so that put a dent in that grant. And then any type of increase is difficult to sustain. So that was one area. So the campuses, as I mentioned, each have 2, so they'll remain with 1 interventionist. There's also a literacy coach at each campus. There is a SciTech lab aide. There is an at-risk interventionist. And so there's still a lot of support at the campuses, but that's one of the positions. And the computer lab position is another one that was also removed. That's a different computer lab position that you were talking about. Yes.
And keep in mind, we're going to keep them. We're just going to see where we can place them.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I just know that kinder through second is truly the most fundamental, important.
Yes.
If our kids are not reading in second grade, they will not in third, fourth, and fifth in high school. They'll struggle with illiteracy. So again, back to data-driving decision-making, I'm curious what our recent benchmarks report for students who do work with in kinder through second, our literacy interventionist. I'm curious how many students will not receive prescriptive literacy if we cut these 17 positions. So I want to know which students will be at risk, because even though we still have 1, that person will have to work with all kinder through 5th. And that's very different from just the early years. And that's obviously a much larger workload, which is less effective for teaching literacy. And so, like, maybe just get that data. And then also, I know your grant ran out, but is there, like, looking for grants or other ways to help support this? Because I know the importance of it is.
A lot of the funding that we receive is generated through enrollment, or our Title I comes from our economically disadvantaged percentage. And so what we do in my office is that we're on top of making sure that campuses are coding correctly, and to be sure that we're going to be able to secure some of that funding. But then, and that's for Title I. For the State Comp Ed component, that's different. That's also based on census block information from the state. So right now, our office is not looking to find new grants. The application that I submit is for Title I, Title II, and Title IV grants.
Okay.
So, and it also includes Title III, which is one that bilingual has.
Okay. And thank you. I'll follow up with an email and forward it
that would be
to
great.
the rest of the board.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam President, I have one last
Yes,
thing,
please.
if it's okay. Thank you. I think in general, we all know we had to go through this pandemic, and we have lost learning. We've heard it consistently. We've read about it. There are a lot of articles out there, and it remains a concern. It obviously has impacted us as well. So I think as we move forward, in part of the conversation we need to have is in the decisions we're making, is how we're making sure that we're going to address that learning loss. And so I think as you make your decisions, and I think this is a very good first draft of objectives and thoughts and ideas. That's why it has the word draft, and it's clearly going to change. You've made that very, very clear, both of you and all of you that have spoken. And I think we now, at some point going into it, by making these decisions, how is it going to affect that instructional core? In other words, teacher to student ratio, teacher to student support interaction for the various groups, dyslexia, special ed, GT, whatever the case may be, but also this lost learning aspect. And I don't know how you can do that. I really don't. Maybe you do. You're the expert. But I think we have to have that connectivity to help us in the decisions we're making to say, you know, if maybe a campus is really struggling, maybe they do need 2 librarians. And this is why, and you can explain it to us. And another campus where they're doing a little bit better and the lost learning has not been impacted as much, most of the kids are at or approaching or meeting or mastering grade level. That I think could help us in the finality of how to tie it all together. Is that fair? Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And go ahead, Ms. Kittle.
Okay, I do have another question. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, that was my thought. Thank you for your time.
Okay, so counselors, I know that TASB's recommendation is that we are over, correct? We're not over in academic, but in the specialties. So can someone identify what are the specialties? Is that social emotional? Is that CTE? What is that?
Good evening. Good evening. Yes, the specialty counselors, we have groups in special education. There's specialty counselors for special education. There's counselors for CTE. There's the social emotional component, but we are reallocating them. But we have those groups, those 3 groups: CTE, SPED, and the social emotional. And then all the others are academic.
Okay. So what's the current suggestion, or the first round of this would be to absorb? And what would happen to our academic counselors? What would they have to inherit if we absorb other positions?
As of now, we have repurposed or reassigned 2 counselors that are college and career-ready counselors. Each comprehensive high school has 2 college and career-ready counselors. One works with 9th, 10th, and 11th graders, and we moved one from Rowe and one from Memorial, and the other college and career counselor works with 12th graders, and they ensure that all 12th graders complete FAFSA, college applications, and scholarships. That's their focus as 12th grade college counselors. The other ones were more of the preparation, TSI testing, and they were preparing the students for senior year.
Yeah. I think my concern mainly is that our counselors already have a lot on their plate, and they also were not included in raises for our recent
correct
recommendation. So maybe just thinking through what workload will they inherit if they're absorbing other counseling responsibilities for other areas like CTE or SEL?
Well, here at McAllen ISD, we have very defined roles for our counselors. They provide a lot of support services because they stay within their defined roles. Once they start inheriting other roles, then the service is going to be affected, right? If most districts have a counselor that's the crisis counselor, the college counselor, and the academic counselor all in one. So when you have systems that are set up that way, then the level of support, of course, is diminished because of the different responsibilities of the counselor. But here at McAllen, we have very defined roles, and that is why our programs are very successful.
Okay. I just want to ask that. Thanks. I have another. Sorry,
Go ahead.
this is my last one.
That's what we're here for.
Okay. The reduction in central office staffing. So I'm seeing which superintendent position is the one that we're.
That was, remember, we combined there was a assistant superintendent for operations and one for finance.
Okay,
We just combine one into,
okay. Maybe that can be a little bit more transparent too, like in the presentation.
okay.
Okay. And so we went from 4 assistant superintendents, and now we have 2 associates and a deputy.
3.
And so maybe calculating the cost savings on that, right? And what that looks like, and was there a cost savings?
There was, yes, there was,
Okay.
yes.
And how much, and include that too, that'd be helpful.
Sure.
Okay, that's all my questions.
When you go home, you're like, I forgot to ask this, I forgot to ask that.
It always happens.
Does anybody else have any more questions?
That's it at this point.
I just want to say that since I'm no longer allowed at any of the sporting events, I'm kidding. Sorry, Brian, had to go there. Thank you, everybody. I think we've had a long day and stuff, so
Yeah.
I'd like to move to, can I make a motion to adjourn?
Yes, you may.
I'd like to move to adjourn. Let's go
Second.
home.
It's been moved by trustee Peña, second by trustee Saldivar. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes 7-0 at 8:46. We are adjourned.
Thank you all. Good job, everybody.